The thing about Trump that is so paradoxical is that Trump lives in this sort of gold glittered Mar-a-Lago world, but there's a relatability to him that people pick up very quickly. I mean, I've seen I'm talking about Hispanics in the Rio Grande Valley. These are basically working class people. They love Trump. I mean, they get in their cars and they make the big Trump train. They're not going to do a DeSantis train. They don't have that same connection with the guy, and it's just I don't know if that's something that can be politically taught, but you recognize it when you see it.
I think you have to go with the
Obama
personality you have. I mean, you're right. Luckily, we don't have to run against Obama again. I think Obama was the most talented politician, certainly of my lifetime. Reagan would probably come in second. But now, I mean, forgetting their policies, for one thing, the country has kind of switched back and forth between someone with charisma and someone with no charisma, so that is helpful. But you have to go with who you are and what you are. I don't think Richard Nixon had a dazzling, charismatic personality, and except for a few things, he was an extremely good president.
So Ian Crossland, who's on Timcast IRL, said that he recently listened to a Trump rally for like the first time, and it was hilarious. Then he comes back a couple days, like yesterday, and he's considering voting for Trump for the first time. And I got invited to the White House a couple years ago for the social media summit. And anybody who's been to a Trump rally, he's doing stand-up. He is a comedian. It's political.
Absolutely.
It's when I
can't imagine this being his first time hearing a Trump rally. By the 14th time, it's not so much fun. He's been saying the exact same things for 7 years.
But
non-political people never hear it.
And you and I go on book tours. We give speeches. We're giving the same speech 20 times, but not to the same people.
So Ian, absolutely.
I think a lot of people. I think very unusual if this is the first time he's seen Trump speak.
Absolutely, it's true for a lot of people.
I don't think so.
Brandon Strzok tells a story about how he just believed what the media had been saying, and then when he tried to debunk this claim, he ended up actually proving Trump was right and the media was lying because he had never actually watched him speak before. A lot of people, the only thing they hear from Trump is what the CNN or MSNBC is going to tell them. They don't actually listen to his speeches.
In 2016, the media thought showing Trump was hurting him. You couldn't turn on CNN or MSNBC or a lot of C-SPAN. It was Fox that was against him then, of course. His speeches were running 24/7. They thought it helped them.
And Ian doesn't watch the news.
Okay,
like most
I'm
Americans.
sure there are. Well, okay, that's why I don't trust the polls right now, by the way. But I think that is not, I don't think that's proof of much.
Well, let me put it this way. I think we're missing an element of Trump that makes him different than other politicians. Let's just say that we have a typical politician, Republican or Democrat, that meets with Kim Jong-un, and comes out and they'll have a statement. The two of us conducted a discussion. Very substantive issues were raised. We raised our concerns about human rights, blah, blah, blah. People have heard this 100 times. They tune it right out. Trump will come out and he'll be like, man, I asked him if he knew what Rocket Man meant, and I gave him a CD. And the room was, he was a really short guy, and he was eating, a pretzel while we were talking. And so people are like fascinated because they're like, I'm not in politics. I don't know what these summits are like. But when I listen to Trump, I'm listening to a real guy tell me that this guy's fat and he's thin and he farted during our conversation and he was overeating, whereas every other politician is giving me a kind of a prepared memo. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot of
I
what
don't find that attractive at all. I mean, maybe you do and
it's
young men
interesting.
do.
It may not be attractive. It's interesting.
In order to win elections, we need suburban women, we need independents, we need conservative Democrats, we need the rhinos you were talking about who do have the R after their name. And I think most of that crap from Trump, I mean, it was 100% worth it. There's a reason I wrote In Trump We Trust for the promises he was making. And also when you talk about, the bold statements and the things he comes out and says, what I remember was build the wall and I'm going to deport illegals so fast your head will spin. And dreamers, I want Americans to have dreams. And gun-free zones don't work. And then he gets elected and says, I'm in favor of taking their guns first. Oh, you guys are afraid of the NRA.
Bump stock ban.
Not me. Bump stock ban, nothing on illegals, nothing on the wall. So I remember those. You can't really make those statements, and manifestly, so did a lot of his base voters, because the only demographic that went down compared to 2016 in 2020 was white men. And it went down a lot, and it went down in all those states across the upper Midwest that he needed to win. Oh, yeah, he didn't need the NRA. Turns out maybe he should have been afraid of the NRA.
So what gets those people back in the states that Trump needs to win? Or what gets independent voters this year? Is there one issue that you think, I mean, I assume you're going to say immigration.
Of course, immigration. Of course, immigration, crime, transgenders. I mean, the wokeness stuff, and the one thing, if I could advise DeSantis, the one way I think he should modify the wokeness thing is it's not just about kindergartners. And I think people are too focused on the schools on that. What is wokeness? It's anti-white racism plus cartoons of anal sex. That's basically the full panoply of what it's the DIE bureaucracies. It's the race before merit thing. It's no longer deciding things on the basis of merit. It is the anti-white male hatred that animates the left.
But you said earlier in this very discussion that white people are the only group that have been taught to hate themselves.
I think they do it on their own.
All right, they do it on their own, and maybe they're taught to do it. But how do you think then running a campaign appealing to white people and saying, in effect, that there's this anti-white ideology in the country, how is that going to be a winning technique?
Well, manifestly, I don't think. I mean, if all white people were liberals, oh, what a horrible, horrible thought. Then we wouldn't get a single
I'm saying
vote
working class
in any
white guys,
presidential
working
election.
class white
they
guys.
They don't hate white people. No, the vast majority of white people don't hate themselves. There are enough in European countries, there are enough in this country to have suicidal immigration policies, to have suicidal hiring policies. If it were 100%, then literally you might as well go and commit suicide. Republicans would never win a single election. Nothing would happen anyplace. But no, that obviously Trump got elected one time by appealing to mostly working class whites who hadn't voted for a long, long time. But mostly, I just think it's true, the anti-white racism. I think it's true, and it's hurting everyone. I'm worried about, the pilots they're hiring. I'm worried about the air traffic controllers they're hiring. It's destroying all of our lives, and they're treating black people like they're children and patting them on the head when they're the shoplifting and the carjacking. But I would make the wokeness, anti-white racism, crime, and immigration.
What are you? What do you think are getting independents in particular to the polls?
I think that we just run a scorched earth campaign against Biden and what the Biden regime is doing. And
so what are the Biden regime's three biggest sins?
Well, its biggest sin now is a wholesale assault on the basic liberty of Americans. I mean, when I came to America in the 70s, I was a teenager, and there was a big political debate going on. But one of the things that really consoled me or relieved me about America, I'm like, look, there are certain basic rights. They're right there in the Bill of Rights. It's not a full compendium of our rights, but right to free speech, right to conscience, right to assemble. You can petition the government without fear for grievances, equal justice under the law. And I'm like, this is not up for political negotiation. It doesn't matter if 90% of people don't agree with me. They can't shut me up, right? So now we fast forward to now, and I say that within 2 or 3 years, all these basic rights, every single one of them, is in serious jeopardy. I'm not even sure with a straight face I could say that we are, in a pure sense, a free country anymore. Think of what the defining characteristics of tyrannical regimes are. Let's take North Korea, China, or the old Soviet Union. Mass surveillance of citizens, systematic censorship, wholesale indoctrination in the schools and the media, a one-party state. Police states are one-party states. They shut down the opposition. Doesn't mean they don't have elections. Iran has elections. China has elections, but it's a controlled opposition that's subordinate to the regime. Political prisoners, criminalization of dissent. And I say, wow, we have all that right now in this country. So that's the point of making a movie called Police State, is saying we're not there yet. Obviously, if we were a full-fledged police state, I couldn't make this movie. I mean, I'd be locked up right now. But we are headed in with great speed and unexpected rapidity toward a country in which none of our rights anymore are safe.
Do you feel like this is something that the average American is aware of, or do you think that, inflation?
They know about January 6th.
Yeah. Right. I was going to say, what issues distract people? It's not that I don't disagree with your point, but, when you are talking about a voters, if you say your rights are being stripped away, is that more impactful to them than saying you can't pay for groceries this month because inflation is so high?
Well, it's not one or the other, right? I mean, just like you can run on the economy and you can run on the transgender issue. One doesn't contradict the other. But I think you have to. I mean, the reason to make a film is to do a wake-up call for people who are not woken up, right? If they were already woken up, the film is, in a sense, pointless. I kind of feel like the animal who's, sees the predator in the trees. I'm trying to warn the herd. But the ordinary guy is saying, no. The ordinary guy goes, I'm not Trump. And, I didn't go in the Capitol on January 6th. And I pay my taxes. So, I'm never going to have the FBI come smashing through my door. And my point is, you could not be more wrong.
Sure.
Because this thing has devolved very quickly in a short time.
Although it's awful what was done to the January 6th protesters, and people should know about it, certainly people who watch this podcast and be annoyed by it. By and large, I would avoid bringing up January 6th. I wrote a book on mobs, demonic. They're always, always dangerous. It's the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. And when I wrote that book, and up until January 6th, I could say, without fear of contradiction, there has never been a right-wing mob. And January 6th, I understand why people thought it was Antifa at first. I understand why the Capitol policeman said, no, we don't need, or I don't know, Nancy Pelosi, the rest of them, they weren't bringing in. There hadn't been a right-wing mob before. And now there's finally been one. And we're all going to be in the nursing home someday, and they're still going to be talking about January 6th. Mm-hmm. It does not reflect well on us. They were idiots. They shouldn't have gone to prison for, 2 life terms and so on and so forth. What was done to Enrique Tarrio, absolutely outrageous. But generally, I'd avoid talking about it.
Why be so deferential to the left?
Because I don't think it helps us for people to remember what happened on January 6th. I think that scares independents. I think it scares suburban moms. I think it pisses off a lot of Republicans. I mean, it kind of pisses me off. Both sides, that they did it. And then the wild, crazy overreaction. I mean, my last book was Resistance is Futile. And the point of it was, we're never, ever going to get away from it. Trump does something dumb. And then the left has such a crazy overreaction. I end up coming to his defense. No, he said something dumb, but he didn't kill 3 nuns. No MSNBC. He didn't nail a kitten to church doors. And they keep overreacting and forcing me to defend whether it's Trump or the January 6th people. Your reaction is so out of proportion to everything that just happened. You're making me switch sides here.
So the issue for me is that politics means very little. If the attitude everyone's going to have is, when the left cries, we answer. Why? If they come out and they're like, Trump said a naughty word, I'll say, you're a moron, have a nice day.
Yes.
The stories you're putting forward are meaningless to me.
Yes.
It's every single time there's a story that if something happens, and let's say there's a story that Andy No tweeted about. A swastika appeared on some cars in a black neighborhood. The left went nuts, started screaming about it. Turns out it was a black man who did it. And then it's gone.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
if the anti-establishment forces, conservatives, the right, libertarians, do not put all of their energy into cultural domination, it's pointless, because the conversation we end up having is Donald Trump said a thing that was innocuous and it became front page news, and we all must answer for it. No. Now it's start setting the news cycle. We need to set the we've been doing it quite a bit. I should say, I mean, we as an anti-establishment forces, calling out Joe Biden on Burisma and keeping Hunter Biden in the spotlight, forcing them to answer to us.
Exactly. And I think also what happens with things like January 6th is a kind of, the smoke arises and a narrative appears, and even we who know that the narrative is false start believing it. So, for example, they wanted to stop the count. Well, no, what was actually going on in January 6th in that building was challenging the election. That was the count that was stopped. It was the challenge that was stopped. So did the people who go into that building, were they trying to stop the challenge? No. The Democrats actually had an incentive to stop the challenges. Mm-hmm. And in fact, the challenges were stopped, because right after January 6th, it's like, okay, let's just go quickly and certify Joe Biden. So now you begin to see that the other side has a motive for having those people in the building.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then
it
you
was
discover
a more convoluted fire alarm.
Exactly. So the January 6th committee knows all this, and they're like, listen, we can't let this cat out of the bag. So we need to construct a careful public narrative and make sure everybody signs on the dotted line.
And
They want people thinking about January 6th. They want to keep showing those videos because every time those videos are shown, no matter what, we know what happened later. But it was not good for the right wing. It was not good for freedom for that to happen.
And what needs to happen is for every anti-establishment media outlet to run nonstop footage and videos of May 29th when they firebombed the White House.
Yes.
But for some reason,
Yes. Or how about burning down the Minneapolis police station? That was what kicked it all off.
Firebombing the White House.
Yep.
I would say is actually worse.
And attacking that beautiful church.
And the church. They set.
Yes.
So they set. What ended up happening was it was the White House grounds that were firebombed. They set fire to a guard post was torched, and they torched the church across the street. There were thousands of far leftists, hundreds of law enforcement injured, and I guarantee you, if you go to a regular person and ask them about May 29th, they'll say, "Huh?"
Yes, you're absolutely
because
right.
What happens is May 29th happens, and the right marches behind the New York Times. Too many Republicans care more about the opinion of the New York Times than their own constituents. And so the narrative is always framed by the left and Democrats.